Hello, welcome to another video blog edition of the Dreizin Report. Again, I'd like to thank the Duran for plugging me and really putting me on the map to begin with. Also, thank you to the guy over at the new Atlas channel for plugging me. Dude, I like your style. I like your haircut. I like your Russian Space Agency shirt. It's all great, and you've got a good channel. Thank you for plugging me. And to all the nice commenters, 99% of the comments are very positive and very complimentary. Thank you so much. I'm really encouraged. I must be doing something right. So first, I'd like to talk about some of the silly news here at home. We've heard a lot of rumors that Putin has had 7 heart attacks. His Minister of Defense, Shoigu, has been arrested and all that. And, then Shoigu comes out in public and he's fine. And so you got to wonder, like, why do people keep believing this stuff? Well, I just got an email from a loyal reader of my blog, and please, if you haven't yet, do check out my blog. It is the web address will be in the little bar now just below my face. Please check it out. There is actually an option to sign up for my mailing list, and basically, you go into any one of the posts, you scroll to the bottom, and there's a sign-up option. It's a 2-part process, so you get an email to confirm, so don't ignore that. But that way, I have your email address, and that way, if I'm shut down on one channel, because we never know what will happen, right, then at least I can reach you through another channel. So please do check out my blog and sign up for my mailing list. Now, I got an email from a loyal reader of my blog, and this is an excerpt from, this is basically a summary of a piece that was in Foreign Affairs Journal. Now, I don't know, maybe they've moved to the web, but about 22, 23 years ago, when I was still in the Army, I was a subscriber to Foreign Affairs magazine. And I believe, at least at that time, it was the official publication of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a very prestigious American institute, not exactly a think tank, but nonetheless very prestigious and very big in the foreign affairs sphere, and otherwise known as a CFR. So this is the official journal of the CFR, and in terms of formatting, it almost looked like some kind of a literary journal or a scientific journal. It was like a little, every issue was like a little book. It had no pictures, nothing. It was really, really professional looking, very kind of eggheadish and respectable. And at that time, although it was really the official journal of American hegemony, nonetheless, it was very down to earth, very practical. And apparently since then, it's gone completely off the deep end, like most of the rest of the media. Now they have, this is the summary. So they have this piece now that's titled, "Putin is going to lose his war." Okay, all right. We can argue that. Putin is going to lose his war. Now here's either the summary or the first paragraph. Russia's domestic environment looks explosive at every level. Plausible rumors are spreading about arrests and sacking of top security officials. At least 7 top Russian businessmen have reportedly committed suicide after first killing their families, making these appear like executions. So, okay, plausible rumors are spreading about arrests and sacking of top security officials. Let me tell you, I've been following some of these plausible rumors, and it's basically stuff that's coming out on Twitter from emotional Russian expats living in Tel Aviv and Paris and other places. These people have absolutely no insight. They're mostly not even reporters. It's just, some businessman or some, random person that hates Putin or whatever. And so they just put something out on Twitter, and now it's a plausible rumor that Putin is arresting his generals. And now it's being picked up by Foreign Affairs magazine. formerly prestigious magazine. And so on top of that, they're saying, well, reportedly a number of Russian businessmen have killed their families and then killed themselves, and it looks like an execution. And look, I'm only aware of there was Russian or formerly Russian businessman living somewhere in Europe, and he did kill his wife and daughter and himself. This was back at the end of February or beginning of March. I haven't heard any such other case. But to say that it looks like an execution, I mean, well, it's like, okay, so the guy went postal, and it must be the KGB that came to execute the guy. Yeah, okay. This is really off the deep end stuff, but it just shows you how far the rot has gone, because this used to be absolutely the flagship publication of American sort of foreign policy realism, but from a hegemonic sort of a background or perspective, and now it's just the hegemony is still there, but the reality is not. I mean, they're just nuts, and so I wanted to share that with you. But what this video is mostly about is yesterday I gave you a summary, at least part of my video, my last video, was a summary of the static defense from the Ukrainian perspective within the Donbass. And now I want to give you the other side of the story, because we're even-handed here at the Dreizin Report. I want to give you the picture of how you overcome this static defense from the opponent's side, in this case, the Russians, right, and the Donetsk and the Lugansk forces. So the first thing that's important to understand is these defense lines that I spoke of yesterday, right? The Ukrainian defense lines that existed in the Donbass as of February of this year, and to some extent have been strengthened, or in other places they have completely fallen apart. But nonetheless, these are intended to be, contiguous chains of defense, okay? And what the Russian term for this is sploshnaya oborona. Now, yesterday I introduced you to defense in depth, which is echelonirованная oborona, but that refers to the depth. Now I'm referring to the surface, right? So what the Russians call it again is sploshnaya oborona, which means continuous defense. And so we're talking about continuous lines of defense, these chains of defensive positions, emplacements, and firing positions that constitute a defense line. What's very important to understand is that this is a chain. Okay, you take out a link in the chain, the entire chain is compromised. Okay, so what you need to maintain the coherence of the line, and what the attacker has to do is compromise the coherence of the line, and ideally to turn this continuous defense, sploshnaya oborona, break it up, turn it into what the Russians call очаговая oborona, which means a point defense. So basically, instead of having a continuous defense, you break it up into pieces, and you have individual points that are defending, and they are not supporting each other, they are not coherent, and then you can take them out much easier. So it is much easier to deal with очаговая oborona, point defense, than it is sploshnaya oborona, which is a continuous defense. Okay, so you as the attacker, again, you want to break up the solid line. Now, it's not solid. It doesn't look like the Great Wall of China from a satellite, right? But it's conceptually solid in terms of, if you had to attack it, you would have the impression that, as you get shot and you're dying, that it is a solid line that you're banging your head against. So now, how do you do that? Well, basically, resources are always limited, and information is a resource. Fire support is a resource. Artillery is a resource. And when you're trying to overcome a enemy defense line, first off, you don't necessarily know where all of the enemy positions within the line are, right? So in the past, let's say in World War II, you would have these, long range reconnaissance guys, infantry reconnaissance guys that would be basically, crawling in on their stomachs at night with, their, guns, cradling their guns or knives in their mouths or whatever. And, and they would go and reconnoiter and report back as to where the enemy positions are. Now, of course, this is dangerous. This is a pretty dangerous job. You might step on a mine, right, in a minefield, maybe get bitten by a snake or something, and maybe get ambushed, right, and not make it back. And so, an elite job, but also a very dangerous job. So we still have some of that. You still see some of that, but for the most part now, especially in eastern Ukraine and the Donbass, where there is quite a bit of open country, you see this job now being done by drones, right? And initially, at the start of the war, the Ukrainians had a massive number of drones, from large Turkish attack drones all the way down to these mini quadricopters, basically just like a model airplane or a model helicopter with a camera. And they still have a lot. The Russians are taking out, as many as 15, 16 a day with their air defenses. But at the start of the war, the Russian and the Donetsk and Lugansk forces, they had something of a deficiency in drones. They had some, but basically what they've had is this function of fully equipping the Russian and Donetsk and Lugansk, in particular the Donetsk and Lugansk forces, with surveillance drones, small surveillance drones, has been taken up by volunteer groups, believe it or not. And they have shipped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of surveillance drones, among other equipment, to the Donetsk and Lugansk forces. These are, sort of NGOs in Russia, right? And they're actually helping to equip the Donetsk and Lugansk forces. And the number one item that they've shipped in are these drones. And so now you have basically literally every single, at this point, every single infantry platoon in these armies, Donetsk and Lugansk armies, and probably already in the Russian army as well, have access to at least one surveillance drone. Okay, and so the sky is just littered with drones, basically. And so instead of having to send these reconnaissance guys into, at night to identify where the enemy positions are, now you can do it even daytime with drone surveillance drones. So basically, how do you identify an enemy position? Well, it could be looking at a village, right? And if you see, that most of the civilians have evacuated, they've disappeared somewhere, or they're hiding in their cellars or the basements. And if you see uniformed gentlemen or people who appear to be males of a fit, a sort of fit body type, from the air, you figure they're soldiers. And if you consistently see them going in and out of a building, and it doesn't appear that they have anything constructive going on there as far as any kind of economic activity, then it's probably an enemy position. Now, it may not necessarily be a line position. It could be a logistical position, or behind the lines, whatever. But that is an enemy position. So basically, you take your time, you identify these enemy positions, and so, but then the problem is that when it's time to attack, you don't have unlimited resources, right? You don't have unlimited artillery, you don't have unlimited air support, and it's a large country. The air support is spread out, very thin, very thin. People figure that it's a video game, Russia can just go and bomb anything. No, the air support is spread out very thin, even despite the sheer number of planes and helicopters. It's spread out over a large area. This is not like, America fighting in Afghanistan, where everything's cool, and then one day we have a American Marine platoon or a 10th Mountain Division platoon that gets ambushed, and now we got to call in air support, and that's sort of like the one tactical air mission for that day, right? Like, no, this is you're flying. I mean, the Russians are flying, maybe like 150 sorties a day or 200 sorties, 250 sorties a day, or even more, and so it's just a very large area, and there's continuous fighting. It's nothing like what America experienced in Afghanistan or Iraq. We were just kind of these occasional flare-ups or nasty little ambushes or whatever. So basically, again, air support is a limited resource. It's in short supply. Artillery is a limited resource. You cannot, this isn't like Stalingrad, where you have, or the Battle of Berlin, where you have, towed artillery that's lined up wheel to wheel for 20 kilometers. Okay, it's not. This isn't that kind of a concentration of forces. So what you have to do is you say, okay, we have identified these enemy or this enemy position on the line. Okay, we are going to rain artillery down on it for as long as we can, and then we're going to send in a mechanized, motorized infantry force very quickly, ideally under continuous, while the shells are still raining down, or while the rockets are still raining down on that position or on that cluster of positions. And we're going to send in very quickly, using armored vehicles. We're going to send in an infantry force to take out that position, or whatever survivors there are after the heavy artillery bombardment. Typically, they might be stunned, they might be disorganized, and you go in there and just kill them and take that position. And then what the Russians call zakrypitsa tam, which means you basically take it and you dig in and you stay there so the enemy doesn't kind of filter back in. Now, this sort of wave, this quick wave of motorized infantry that goes in to take this position on the enemy defensive line, ideally, either during or well, shortly before or shortly after, rather, a artillery bombardment. That is in Russian called a shturmovaya kolonna, which literally translates to assault column, shturmovaya kolonna. So this assault column, it may be a column shape, maybe a wedge shape, whatever, but it goes in very quickly, kind of comes out of nowhere, just all of a sudden, a couple of minutes, and you're on the enemy position, basically. You dismount and you just, you waste whoever's there. Ideally, they'd be mostly dead or stunned, disorganized, whatever. And then you dig in. And so what you've done is now you have compromised the coherence of the enemy defensive line, because you have taken out one or more links in that chain. Okay, and the chain only truly properly works if all the links are there, right? Now, what you can also do, I've given you a kind of a simple conceptual example. What you can do is you can have several of these assault columns, that go in at the same time, basically bombard several different points in the line, and then have several of these assault columns that go in and try to take different points in the line. Now, of course, the infantry that goes in, they're relying on good accurate artillery, and otherwise, it's not going to be pretty, because if you're coming in, especially on open country, at enemy positions where the enemy is dug in, or they're behind 2 feet of masonry wall in one of these sturdy Russian Donetsk houses, and you don't want to have be taking a mortar fire, automatic grenade launcher fire, or guided anti-tank guided missile fire from these types of positions, because uh, you don't know, as the infantryman or as the driver of these armored vehicles that are going in this wave, you don't know uh, exactly precisely where. I mean, you have have a general idea, but you don't necessarily know precisely where they are. And the point is, you're in open ground. They're behind cover, and that's not really an even match, right? It's when you're advancing, it's always very, very dangerous. The way that Russians, and thus of course the Donetsk and Lugansk forces, advance when they're on their armored vehicles is, well, they have these most typically it's these BMPs, which are stands for Броневая машина пехота, which literally means armored infantry car. But they're these very low profile armored vehicles. They can fit some. They can provide seating inside for maybe a half dozen guys, in addition to the driver and the gunner. But typically, oftentimes the infantry is actually on top, because what the benefit is, if you have, let's say, anti-tank guided missile coming at you, can oftentimes actually see it coming. They're not flying like at like a bullet. I mean, they're not flying at faster than the speed of sound. You can actually see them, and oftentimes you can just jump off, and the driver might be stuck there. But so that's certainly a benefit of the way the Russians do it. That's why you see these Russians, and they seem to be on top of their armor, rather than inside it. And that's one advantage. Now, what the Americans do is the most common infantry fighting vehicle in the U.S. arsenal, U.S. Army arsenal at least, is these Bradley fighting vehicles, and they're very large. They have a very high profile, much higher than the Russian BMPs, and basically the U.S. infantry are inside these Bradleys, whether it's maybe 5 or 6 guys inside, in addition to possibly as many as 8 inside these vehicles, in addition to the driver and the gunner. And basically, then they're functioning as dragoons essentially. They dismount, and then they can function as infantry. But they're inside these vehicles, and it's really dangerous. If you get hit successfully, then potentially everyone's dead. There's no chance to get out. So at least the Russian way, you can kind of jump off when you see a threat. But anyway, of course, if you're under mortar fire, or that you're going to be under some kind of a fire where there's shrapnel coming in, you can get inside for cover. But anyway. So you have these again. You send in these waves of these assault columns, that, or one or more, that attempt to follow up on the artillery bombardment of key points, with key identified points within the enemy defensive line. Okay, and once you do that, you get to those positions and you secure them. You ideally for your side, kill or take prisoner anyone who's still remaining there, and then you capture their weaponry. You may start using their weaponry yourself, or you may load it up on your vehicle, for later use. And then you attempt to further reconnoiter the area. And basically, if you're successful in digging in there, then you can signal to for reinforcements, and continue, basically then start enveloping the line from the other side of the line. So from inside of the line. Now, basically, what I liken this to a chess game where I'm not a chess genius, so I typically just move my pawns out. So I have this zigzag phalanx of pawns, and then that's typically not very effective, because better players, they'll send their knight in there behind my line of pawns and start eating me up from the inside. And that's really what you want to do. to break up these defensive lines, basically. So you break the coherence of the lines. You send some guys forward. They dig in, and then you send more, where it's safe to do so, and start enveloping from the inside. And then what happens is, the defenders obviously are not facing their ideal situation, because now they have to defend from all sides, and they have lost communications, at least physical communication, the ability to go back and forth between their various positions, the ability to transport ammunition and additional weapons and evacuate wounded between positions and so forth. And so really they have lost a substantial part of their combat capability, because now they're cut off, and they have a very thin line that's not functioning as a line anymore. So basically then they're into a Chagala Barona, which is point defense. And so you can continue sending up basically at that point you send in the tanks or other heavy weapons that provide a direct fire support to the infantry. So at that point, you're basically just hammering away at the remaining enemy positions with a tank, until they're just basically buried in their own foxholes or fighting positions or whatever houses they're taking cover in or whatever. And at that point, you can encircle them. And if some guy or a squad of guys is trying to defend a house, or a platoon of guys is trying to defend a compound, it's very hard when you're encircled now, and you've got a couple of tanks that are just pounding you and pounding you and pounding you, and you can barely even raise your head out the window to try to shoot back with anything. So that is, if you're the attacker, that is a much better place to be. In terms of encircling these defensive points, than trying to make a break, a quick break across the field to the enemy line, where you don't know exactly who's going to be shooting at you from where. So then once you've taken that line, right? If the enemy has a defense in depth, let's say the next line is 1 kilometer. 2 kilometers down, further down the road or whatever. Then you slowly bring up your artillery, you bring up your second echelon forces, you bring up your command, and basically make the old line now is your position, and that's your new base, and then you're going to be taking the next line. And for this, let me tell you, when you're dealing with fixed enemy positions, right? Fixed positions. In Russian, they're called огневые точки, which means fire points, огневые точки. And what you need to do is to suppress this fire point, to liquidate it, which in Russian is подавить огневую точку противника, right? So you have to suppress these fire points. And the enemy typically has taken cover inside structures that are very sturdy, either a continuous trench with some earthworks and wooden ceilings and so forth, or it's some kind of civilian structure or infrastructure where you just basically the way they build over in the former USSR is you got these even people's residential homes, personal family homes, have walls that are sometimes 2 feet thick or more. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So in these situations you need direct fire support, and it has to be more than just anti-tank guided missiles. You need a higher rate of fire. You need a larger volume of ammunition. And so in these cases you have a lot of options. I mean, you have automatic grenade launchers. You have the 30 millimeter cannon on top of the BTR and the BMP armored vehicles that they have over there. But you also have tanks. You need tanks as there've been very few real tank battles per se in this war. There's been a few, and the Russians, of course, always come out on top because they have extremely well-trained tankers. But for the most part, here the tanks are used as a direct fire support, where it's basically to assault enemy emplacements, enemy controlled structures. And there's typically in war there is a shortage of fire support for taking enemy positions. This happens. This is just a fact of war, a fact of life in war. And so now what's happening is the Russians. I haven't seen it, but apparently there's a video of a train loaded with T-62 tanks, which are 1960s vintage, old school Soviet tanks that were just kept in warehouses or whatever in Russia, and now it's on a train and it's heading into the Donbass. And what the thinking is that these tanks are going to be given to some of the reserve units of the Donetsk and Lugansk forces that don't have first line equipment, as well as some of the Russian volunteer units that have been formed by volunteers coming over from Russia, sort of these volunteer militia guys, including the Cossack regiment that's now fighting in North Lugansk. So basically what they're going to be doing, what it seems like they're going to be doing, is equipping some of these second echelon forces, or otherwise, sort of not fully equipped forces now, with these older tanks to provide fire support for the advance. So you can expect that the U.S. mainstream media now and the Pentagon are going to say, look, they have these old tanks, that are 60 years old. They're bringing them out of storage because they're out of the good stuff. They're out of the new stuff, and it's all being destroyed. No, that's not true. That's not true. What it is just a simple shortage of fire support, just like in any war. And, naturally, I don't absolutely, I'm not saying, trying to be snarky, anything about the U.S. Army, that they're doing something wrong or they're not heroes or whatever. But the fact is, the U.S. Army has not fought a war like this. No Western army has fought a war like this since Vietnam, if not before, and if not World War II. And it's very slow going, and it does require some very, very brave people that just basically just write themselves off and say, you know what, I might die, but I can't think about it. Because, when you're driving a BMP, across that field at the enemy line, not knowing whether that position, enemy position, has been suppressed or not. Not knowing whether you're going to get, burned alive by an incoming missile or whatever, or if you're going to make it. That's some interesting psychology, and my hat's off to those kind of people. So anyway, thanks for watching. We're keeping it real here at the Dreizin Report, and again, you get to see get to listen to my closing theme, which I enjoy very much every time, and I hope you do too. We'll see you again soon.